We have a slab. It's so refreshing to see a big piece of the puzzle complete. I was so excited, I had to do a flip. Surprisingly, pouring the concrete went really quickly, so let's jump right into how it happened. There were a few things to fine-tune before the first cement truck arrived, so guys showed up early to do that. A few forms needed to be put back in place from being moved for whatever reason. Double check all the rebar ties to make sure they were still good. I also added one more small conduit line sticking out of the form in the far corner of the building to run cables underground for anything in the future. When the first cement truck arrived, they started pouring right away. They began with the deepest sections and worked their way up. That means they started with the footings and worked their way to the slab. The concrete was very fluid at first. It filled in all the gaps and surrounded the rebar. This part seemed like it was filling a pool in slow motion, or a really slow mudslide, or lava. Anyway, I think it looked cool. They worked their way around all the edges and the footing in the middle. There really isn't much to do during this part except watch the concrete fill in. The trenches and forms do just about all the work. Once it all started, it all went super quick. The first bit of concrete was poured just after 7 a.m., and by 9:30, all the concrete was poured, and they were wrapping up all the equipment. It took 2 trucks to fill in the footings, and 2 trucks to fill in the slab. So, 4 cement trucks being used to fill a 900 square foot slab in 2.5 hours. Pretty cool. In order to get the cement from the truck to the backyard, they used a pump. The cement truck pulled up to the pump, dumped the cement directly into it, and the machine pumped it through a hose all the way to the back. The hose makes it relatively easy to control where the cement goes. The main guy running the hose has a remote for the pump. He could control when to start and stop it. I would assume it had different speeds as well, so if you wanted to pump it slowly, it could do that. I don't know for sure though, because I was too mesmerized to ask. When all the footings were filled up, they started on the slab and stem walls. The stem walls are the raised border of concrete around the workshop space. This will allow me to hose down the floor without damaging the walls. The workshop floor has a very gradual slope to it, towards the big opening at the end. For the slab, they started at the far back corner and worked their way towards the opposite corner nearest the driveway exit. The entire workshop floor is too wide to screed all at once, so they split it down the middle. A few metal stakes were driven into the ground down the center line. They put a board spanning from one stake to the next. That board acted as a guide for another board to screed the cement. This is just the first step of getting the cement at the right level. Once they got past that point, they pulled the stake out and filled in the hole. As they worked on the other half of the workshop, they used the already screeded cement to guide the new section. If there was too much cement, they pushed it along. If there wasn't enough, they mushed the concrete back to fill in the void. When they got to the guest house portion of the slab, they did the same thing with the stake, but only needed to use one stake. Again, pouring this whole thing went so quick. It would have gone even quicker, but we had to wait at least a half hour for the third cement truck. If I slept in, I would have missed the entire thing. Some of the concrete had seeped out the bottom of the forms, which is all good because it's just trying to find somewhere to go. Some of that extra concrete was utilized to load up the stem wall forms that hadn't been completely filled in. After sections of the slab were screeded, the finishing process could begin. This guy used a trowel on a long pole to give the first pass on the cement. The slab is still too fluid to stand on, so this is the way to reach it from the outside. This version of finishing the floor had to be done a few times in different directions over the course of a couple hours, until the concrete solidified enough to crawl around on. It had been overcast all morning, which was great because that kept it nice and cool, and slowed the drying process of the concrete. As we waited to let the slab solidify a bit, the sun came out, and it was off to the races. They used a chalk line to mark the surface of the concrete at a few places. Those lines were used to cut expansion joints. Again, it was still too early to be on the slab, so they used the long pole again. This tool, when run back and forth, cuts a groove in the slab, like the fin of a surfboard slicing through the water. The guys then used a multitude of tools to continue smoothing out and finishing the slab. Once it was deemed solid enough, the inside forms of the stem wall could be pulled off and smoothed out. Soon after, it was solid enough to start working on the slab. The guys used small sleds to distribute their weight as they troweled the surface. This was the final pass on the slab, so they were meticulous with making everything smooth as butter, especially cleaning up the expansion joint lines and all the corners. There's a few different tools used to clean up those grooves. Once everything was smooth as can be, the only thing left to do was keep it cool. Something I learned is that concrete gets hot. Not hot enough to cook an egg or a cookie or anything like that, but it can get pretty toasty. The reason for the heat is the chemical reaction while the concrete is curing. You have to keep it cool during this process. If it gets too hot, you risk getting some major cracks in the slab. So we were pretty active with keeping water on it to cool it down. You can even see it steaming because it gets that hot. As the water dried, we put more water on it. For the first few hours, we had to water it about every 30 minutes. The sun was beating down, causing the water to dry even faster. Okay, Monday morning. The slab had been curing all weekend, and it was time to pull off the rest of the forms. Some of them didn't go easily. The slab had a pretty good grasp on a few of them. Some of the boards near the bottom would have to be left for another day. An entire week after the pour, I was pretty excited to see what a clean workshop surface looked like. So I took a broom and did a solid sweep of the shop floor. I took my time and used this opportunity to knock down the imperfections and just take note of any rough areas of the floor. If there was a small loose piece sticking out, the stiff broom did a pretty good job of chipping it away. After doing a sweep over the entire floor, the workshop just looked so good. I was starting to learn and familiarize myself with the lay of the land. Over time, I'm sure I'll learn all of its little characteristics. Well, the concrete slab is poured and ready for the next step, framing. It's just about time to go vertical. Okay, that's it for now. See ya.